I think that when I gave that speech, it was Bitcoin Nashville in July of 2024, and I gave those forecasts. And obviously, I gave them. There's a model, Bitcoin 24. It's published. It's on GitHub. Just go Google it, download it, and you can plug in all your own assumptions about inflation and innovation. The two big drivers of Bitcoin price going up are innovation and inflation. Right? Bitcoin's going to go up because capital is going to be created by technology, and as the world gets richer, the capital is going to have to find a home. And Bitcoin price is going to appreciate because there'll be more currency, more dollars, more pesos, more rubles, more everything. And the price is going to appreciate because people are going to sell their 20th century physical assets and financial assets and the like in order to buy digital assets. And that trend is going to accelerate as people get educated, because why would anybody want to own a warehouse in the middle of Africa when you could own the equivalent amount of Bitcoin? They're all going to trade when they can. It's just going to be a question of supportive institutions. Give me a safe way to buy $1 billion of it, and then supportive regulations, and then education. So these are all things that are simple to predict. And that was my prediction in July of 2024. But look what happened since then, right? Since then, we had a red sweep. You had a pro-Bitcoin Congress, pro-Bitcoin Senate, pro-Bitcoin House, pro-Bitcoin president. You have every cabinet member, or nearly every cabinet member, owns Bitcoin, is pro-crypto. They're all very supportive. And now you have a supportive Secretary of the Treasury. You have one executive order, directing that we create a vibrant digital assets industry in the United States. You have a second executive order creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve. You have a huge amount of momentum. What I've seen is a sea change over the past 16 weeks. Most conventional investors and traditional investors everywhere in the world that were not interested or afraid of this asset class, they have all flipped their view to being very curious. So I've been invited to conferences in South America with the 100 wealthiest families for the first time. I've been invited to speak to all the Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds for the first time. I've been invited to speak at Morgan Stanley's tech conference, the most prestigious one in the tech industry of tech investors, for the first time. I've been invited to speak at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee, for the first time. I've been invited to the White House to speak to the President of the Cabinet for the first time, right? And so there's that speech that I gave on Tuesday at the National Press Club on, there were 2 senators on stage with me for the first time. And so what you have is an avalanche of institutional interest by mainstream policymakers, business leaders, investors. And if you roll the clock back 16 months, none of it existed. The number of institutional investors invested in spot Bitcoin ETFs went from 6 to 3,300 over 12 months. So I would say that institutional adoption is clearly afoot.
Bitcoin remains your safest bet in the stock market. Despite market fluctuations, the cryptocurrency continues to be resilient. We're about to unravel some mind-bending news shaking up the financial world. Leading the charge are the prominent market analysts Fred Krueger and Michael Saylor, and the crypto expert Ali Martinez. Brace yourself for a wild ride through the twists and turns of Bitcoin's recent rollercoaster journey. Welcome back to Investocracy Crypto.
When you say that Bitcoin is being used potentially for a trade, is it the thought process that, let's say if you had gold, you put it on a ship, you move it over somewhere, there's tariffs, right? You would get hit with those tariffs. Is it technically, if some supplier in Vietnam is doing something with somebody in the United States, there should be a tariff, they just can't enforce it? Or do you think that it is actually not subject to the tariffs, and that's why it's outside the system? Like there's a nuance between is it actually under the rules, but they can't enforce it, and so it's kind of like a gray area? Or is it just like no one's even thought yet about tariffing, the digital world?
And that's where this comes into play, is I think it's just we don't it's very easy to go, okay, what are the imports we have that we ship in? What are the numbers? Okay, 3.2 trillion. Okay, the biggest problem we had, and the reason the markets initially responded as bad as they did, if it had been an announcement that said, okay, we're going to have tariffs of $400 billion, I think the market would have been like, all right, that's going to get negotiated down to 250. The problem was he brings out these boards and everyone looks at it and is like, this is like a high school presentation that we're doing. How did you come up with those numbers? And then X starts figuring out and decoding how it went on. I think that is archaic in terms of the system of goods, of imported goods, is not as important as the service side of the economy. I mean, it doesn't get published a lot, but we got a lot of revenues around the globe that the US has that are in services.
Amidst the chaos of the stock market, every shift feels like a roller coaster ride. However, according to market analysts, Bitcoin seems to be caught in a whirlwind of uncertainty, with whispers of a correction that could extend for months. If their predictions hold, we might witness Bitcoin hitting a jaw-dropping $175,000 by September. That's a whopping 107.83% gain waiting at the end of this tunnel of market fluctuation and uncertainties.
Bitcoin seems to be the shining light on the lighthouse in the sea of the storm. It's down, but it is not down nearly as much as, one, you would think it would be down, and two, in the same time period, many stocks are down more than Bitcoin has been down. And so talk through a little bit as to why is Bitcoin holding up so well, and what does that tell us about both Bitcoin and maybe the market?
So I think this has been a week that everyone will look back on Bitcoin if it continues to hold in the way it is this week, around the 80 to 84,000 level, as a major turning point in terms of what's gone on. And I think there's a couple roads that people should think about, because the narratives will shape on Bitcoin this year for people on Wall Street that have never thought of it more than it's a levered NASDAQ. I'd rather have the Mag 7. The Mag 7 are now down 20% year to date before the opening today. Bitcoin as of yesterday's close was down 13. So it's outperformed by 7. I mentioned last week, the prior 2 years, it outperformed the Mag 7 both of those years by more than 25%. So you had a scenario that it was already outperforming during the bull market. Well, now it's outperforming in the bear market. But this week has been a difference. In the last 2 days, so since the tariff announcement, Liberation Day was done, I think the first road that people are starting to travel down to a new narrative is that you can't put tariffs on Bitcoin. And Michael Saylor posted this on X yesterday, and I don't think a lot of people saw it, but it's true. If people want to start exchanging trade in Bitcoin, which has been rumored to be happening or it's been talked about, well, now you're starting to get kind of this belief that maybe that's what it is. Second thing is, when the market bounces and it comes out, the system has changed. That is what people are going to remember today. So in 2020, we had Bitcoin just explode higher on the back of a new system of MMT. That was the belief. They printed so much money, it's got to go higher. I think I'm a believer in the fact that Bitcoin and gold are outside the system. The globalized system that's been in place since post-World War II, if you didn't think it was over before, it's over. I think trade is now affected forever, and it forces people to do things more digitally, and it's going to force them to move more and more money into digital cross-border transactions. Stablecoins will grow. This is part of the network effect. So I think the reason Bitcoin is outperforming is because the market is starting to see the narrative for it, not during this really bad period, but I like to find assets that are doing well during bad periods, because those are the ones that typically have some major structural story. And I think Bitcoin is starting to get a little bit of its shine back that gold had taken away from it. And I think it'll rally hard.
But hold on, that's not all. For the time being, it seems like investors are hitting pause, waiting with bated breath for the next big player to step into the arena. Despite the recent reciprocal tariffs announced by the US government, Bitcoin remains resilient, showcasing only a 4% price dip and bouncing back stronger than ever. But before going any further, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make, so if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
I don't know what'll happen to those companies, and that's where to go. If we want to have like a serious deleveraging, it can happen. I just think Bitcoin It's outside of that whole system. We know the government, in terms of the administration, supports Bitcoin. So to your point, gold is very easy to track, and it's a slow moving thing. If you wanted to pay for something in gold, how long would it take to get the physical gold from point A to point B? In Bitcoin or in any kind of digital transaction, it should take seconds and it should be over. And I just think that's what's going to happen, is that the new rails for the new economy, which were already happening anyway, think of it as this is just speeding up people looking at that vision, and it's going to happen sooner than what people thought.
When I look at the market in general, I think one of the parts that strikes me is actually the younger people are super chill right now. It's the traditional stock investors that are like banging their head against the wall. They're in shambles. They're so upset. They think this is like, D-Day, right? It's like literally my stock market portfolio is getting obliterated. This guy in the White House, he's a horrible person. I can't believe this, whatever. But I go talk to these young people and they're like, the S&P 500 is up over the last year. NASDAQ is up over the last 12 months. What are you guys complaining about? Right? How do you settle that? Is that just like the young people are used to the volatility? They're used to crypto. They're used to kind of a different relationship with financial assets. And it's kind of the older generations, like they've never seen, the volatility that the younger people have. And so a 10% drop is catastrophic to them and kind of it breaks their mental, model. But it just is like, if the stock market's up over the last year, what are you complaining about? Why are you crying?
Yeah. So on one thing that has happened, and I think there's Wall Street, which is clearly just they're insane right now. Remember, I've had an overnight portfolio until this year, every year from 1994 until 2024. So I'd be awake at night looking. It's amazing when you're not in there. And I grew up in the emerging markets. I can always look at the market and be like, oh, this is a great opportunity. The best things I've ever purchased in life, houses, property, stocks, anything is during these panics. So that's good. My 401k, that if you type that into Google Trends, there are a lot of people in the country that are retired that are looking at their 401k and being like, oh my God. So it's not just Wall Street. It is some Main Street that has pension funds. But I agree with you 100% when it comes to young people. And I've talked to my son about it. And because my son is 19 and I can, he's traded crypto, he's used to the ups and downs. But the other thing is he's also grown up on social media. He's grown up without the same kind of brand loyalty that people do. Like they just tend to move around more and more and they're willing to give up something. They have an entrepreneurial mindset where something going down and losing money, they do view it somewhat as a badge of honor, but they also realize that they figured out the game, which is it always ends up going higher in the end. And that's because they've made the connection for whatever reason. And maybe they haven't seen a bear market that's lasted for a long time yet. But my son's seen the crypto bear market and it was pretty painful to go down in some of his stuff. He gave back $80,000 that he made, all of it. 780,000 back to 700. And now he's at 3,000. I don't really know. I think younger people have more of a tolerance. They definitely have a different perspective. And I think that's one of the reasons why the gambling side of the economy just continues to grow up versus the investing side.
Bitcoin's journey is far from over as it proves to be a reliable asset amid market uncertainties. The winds of change are swirling around, hinting at a potential market shift that could skyrocket Bitcoin's value to new heights. With a current trading price of $83,805 and trading volume surging ahead, it's evident that the crypto market is brimming with energy and opportunities, prompting investors to hold on to their Bitcoin and see this drop as a buying opportunity. What do you think? Share your thoughts. And finally, if you would like to know more about cryptocurrencies or specifically Bitcoin, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. See you there.